I want to start off, first of all, by saying, I hope you're safe. I hope you, your wife, your daughter, I hope you're all well and are as protected as you possibly can be. Um, are you are you in a safe place? An air raid siren could go off at any moment.
What are you talking about? There's- For the last 6 days, I've been hearing explosions overhead that look like they're happening on the roof of the building. I mean, there are places that have bigger problems, but it is certainly unsettling
Yeah.
when you basically have them go to the underground shelter and there's like old people clogging the stairwell, and you're not supposed to use the elevator. And we live on a sixth floor. Anyway, 3 times a night, like recent night was at 12:30, 4 a.m., and 7 a.m. This happens, and you have like a minute to get down there, and then explosions overhead, like massive, massive explosions. So little kids can be rattled. Dogs, there's a couple dogs in our shelter. They're not so happy. Um, it's obviously disturbing, but yeah, realistically, the situation has been very asymmetrical here for six
Yeah.
days. Here's what actually happened. Fired 400 ballistic missiles at Israel in the past 5 nights, so an average of almost 100 a night. Only 5% got through. They fired 1,000 drones. Zero of them got through. So you're
Wow.
looking at 20 missiles that through and landed, uh, and it killed 20 people because most of them fall in empty areas, and about 4 or 5 landed in like on houses, and they killed 4 or 5 people in each house. So that's obviously it's like roulette, and your chances to survive are really quite good in a country of over 10 million people. 20 people being killed in 5 days is a tragedy for each family, but it's you know you learn to the thing about human beings is they adjust to whatever situation they're in. It's really quite remarkable. So when you see, for
Right.
example, the people in Gaza who are enduring the most stupendous of cataclysms, and you ask yourself how could they possibly endure it? Not only that, some of them are fanatical enough to want more and to refuse to surrender by Hamas. It's because we're resilient creatures. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. It really is. It really is astonishing, and it's anyway, we appreciate the fact that I mean, part of the reason that I think we want to do this is not only the analytical perspective and the fact that you are so tied in with all of your sources and all of your journalistic experience in the region, but also um, I think it's important for people to get the up close sense of you are in the middle of this. Like this isn't some chess exercise of like strategic, like in the movie War Games, like shall we play a game? This is no game. This is very very real for you and your family, and so we appreciate the fact that you're coming to us to give us the very real feel of what this is. You just posted on Substack a kind of a recap of the last 6 days. I was wondering if in just like a couple of minutes, I know it's a ton of material. I know it's a ton of material to try to encapsulate, but for anyone who's been either purposely or just because they have other things going on in their lives, for anyone who needs a catch up on how we got here over the last 6 days, could you just walk us through really quickly what that recap is and where we are, how we've gotten here?
well, Israel has long been agitating about its more than suspicion, its conviction that Iran is trying to build a nuclear weapon, and the various deniability around this, Iranian program, I've never found compelling. Iran is enriching uranium to the 60% level, which is one level below full atomic bomb level. Civilian enrichment occurs between 3% and slightly higher. There has
Mm,
never in a history of nuclear science been an enrichment at 60% that wasn't for weapons purposes. So it's pretty clear what they're doing. They're widely believed to already be a nuclear threshold state. Where you end up with a debate is that people like the not too bright Tulsi Gabbard, for example, a few months ago said, well, Iran is not making a bomb and doesn't have. Well, yeah, they may in fact never make a bomb if their purpose is to put themselves within 2 days of breakout, which is precisely where they're headed towards with lightning speed. Um, and actually never do a bomb and believe that that technicality means something to anyone. Now, there are legitimate questions about who has the right to have a nuclear weapon, and I was just on Al Jazeera, and they asked me how come Israel has a weapon. They denied, but I mean, no one believes the denials. Um, in fact, I've heard it admitted. Put it that way. Um, so why is that okay? I would also ask why it's okay for America to have a nuclear weapon that can destroy the world, or Britain, or France, or China, or Pakistan. um, Basically, Israel's argument is we're never going to use it. It's purely defensive. We threaten the existence of no country. And moreover, we're a responsible, functioning democracy, a Western society with a developed economy, and it's purely for defensive purposes. Basically, we're a democracy and we're not crazy. Now, for that argument to hold water, you have to actually act not crazy. And some people would suggest that Israel's actions, on occasion, belie that claim. But putting this aside, there's no disputing that you don't want a dictatorship run by religious fanatics who openly calls for the destruction of a country to nuclear weapons. Um,
So this
so
begs
it
the
was a terrible.
question. This, as our people say every year, Manish Tana Halila Hazeh. Why now? Like, why this argument has been going on for years, for decades, right? I visited Israel in 2002, 2003, and in speaking to members of the Knesset, I may have mentioned something about Israel's nuclear capability, and they said, "Well, we've never totally admitted that, but I mean, so like this argument about Iran's nuclear capability has been going on forever. Why 6 days ago?
They believe they were close to breakout, and
Ugh.
the actual answer now is that they undoubtedly, in my view, got a green light from Trump. And Trump, while he was still sort of pretending otherwise in the beginning, it's in the nature of Trump to once he perceives a success to hitch his wagon to it
Uh,
and to even cover it. So it was a pretty short journey from the U.S. saying we got nothing to do with this, which was never credible because Israel would not dare because they depend on the U.S. Um, to
and you,
Trump
by the
saying,
way,
well,
posted in one of your recent pieces that this. There's pretty good evidence for the fact that Trump was in on this from the get go and just trying to see how it went before trying to claim ownership of it. We know that because the U.S. prepositioned tankers and support aircraft in the region weeks ago, signaling that it anticipated an Israeli strike.
they were preparing for a contingency, but I'm telling you, Matt, this is not a contingency. Israel can't, like, its air force would fall apart for lack of spare parts if not for the Americans. They're facing economic sanctions at the UN Security Council if not for the Americans. The Americans are the ones who are strong arming everyone into not arresting Bibi Netanyahu when he travels abroad, despite his, the warrant against him from his oppressors in The Hague. I mean, Israel, no, no. The idea that Israel would have done this, scuttling, the U.S. talks with Iran that were scheduled to take place in Oman this week and ruined America's big plans because the deal was imminent. It's absurd. You have to live in a special universe of naive to believe such a thing. So, of course, he gave the green light. But he stopped pretending when it started looking successful. So, in recent days, he's saying stuff like, and this is kind of funny, we control the airspace over Iran. We control? It's Israel, not America. Same country? I mean, maybe it's a 51st state, but I haven't read about it yet. Um, he says I gave Iran 60 days to do a deal. They didn't agree, and it's a terrible shame. You see what happened on the 61st day. He's kind of treating Israel like a proxy that he unleashed upon Iran. Israel was dying to do this with the Americans to take out the nuclear program. It's as simple as that.
I see.
You hear people in the punditry space overthinking, saying stuff like, well, they want to prove who's more powerful and all this stuff. And with Netanyahu, generally cynicism is justified because he is a master of skullduggery. But in this case, actually, what you see is what you get. The entire Israeli security and political establishment is dying to destroy Iran's nuclear program. And they got the green light for whatever reason because everyone believed breakout was close enough, or just because Trump is Trump. And he went ahead and acted. Uh, the subtext, though, is that as soon as it became clear that their success is monumental, and by the way, to answer your original question, I'm sorry about all the rabbit hole about the past. Israel's success has been monumental. My recent the piece I just put out summarizing the whole thing is called the 6 Day War so far. There's a reason why I wanted to do that on the sixth day, because the 6 Day War for Israel, the 67 war, is remembered as a almost mind-bending success, where they like quintupled their territory and defeated every Arab army neighboring them, and it was a surprise because they were like a tiny country at the time, and they did it with some brilliance. Preemptive strike when the Arabs were obviously about to strike, destroying the Egyptian and Jordanian Air Force, is a Syrian Air Force on the ground, essentially, and then having total air command. So what happened very quickly over the past 6 days is that hundreds of Israeli aircraft, and this is a small country but with a major air force, uh, basically have controlled the skies over Iran and Tehran. They destroyed their air defenses. That project began already last fall when Israel retaliated for the first Iranian missile strike against it. Um, so Iran has been left with no air defenses, no radar. They've shut down their own internet. Israel has attacked multiple nuclear sites and caused tremendous damage, especially Natanz, the IAEA reports. They took out the head of the Iranian military and of the Revolutionary Guard, which is their second military, the heads of it, not like a couple generals, the actual chief of staff of both. They took out every major nuclear scientist in the country and a whole bunch of other senior figures. And they've already killed the guy who took over for the head of the Revolutionary Guard, who was killed on Friday, yesterday. I mean, they are conducting attacks at will on Iran. So far, not making the mistake they did in Gaza, where they seem to be harming, like they are harming a lot of civilians. It's not been that, because they are very much a pain to project that they're at war with the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people. Remember, Iran and Israel were very close allies until 1979, when the Islamic Republic hijacked the revolution against the Shah. The Iranian regime is unbelievably unpopular. They rule by nothing resembling consent, by fear and oppression and violence, successive waves, successive attempts to have street protests and maybe organize some kind of political change or revolution or upheaval have been quashed with murderous violence.
Mm.
So the subtext is, given all the success that Israel's had, it's really tempting to try to somehow engineer a collapse of the regime,
That's actually a
which
perfect
is
catch
not a
up.
government.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect catch up to where we are now, because the big discussion going on in the US now is, will Trump engage? And by engage, what we really mean is drop 30,000-pound bombs to try to break through to the main nuclear enrichment site in Fordo and try to get really at the heart of Iran's nuclear capability. And he appears at this hour. We're recording this. We're going live. I mean, we're both recording and going live. It's 4:30 p.m. on Wednesday, the 18th. And the reporting up to the minute is he remains torn. At any minute, this could change. Sources inside the administration say the direction of flow is toward action, is toward the U.S. getting involved. But I was just beginning to get into, as I was filibustering just a little bit as we were trying to make the technology work to get you on at the beginning, I was beginning to talk a little bit about the major earth-shaking consequences that are on offer here, including disruption of world economies by Iran shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, all the way up to the potential for them to maintain enough fissile material to take the final step, create a bomb or two or three, and retaliate against Israel, against Israel's nuclear capability, or against U.S. assets. And before you know it, we are in a very, very precarious shooting war in which we're involved. So the stakes are extremely high. Um, I was saying a moment ago that you are extremely well sourced in Israel. You are talking to the people who are deeply enmeshed and thinking about all of this, and so knowledgeable about the costs, benefits, the risks. What would you say is the number one thing that people who are in the know inside Israel are worried about at this hour, in terms of where this could go?
I mean, there's a number of really bad scenarios. One is if one of the missiles gets through and creates catastrophic loss of life in Israel. Like if it lands on a tower and kills 300 people, then Israel will feel compelled to really react badly, and then the whole paradigm of the war changes.
Mm.
Obviously, on the ground, responsible people would be concerned that Israel's plan to draw the U.S. in backfires, and the result is a massive war in the Middle East, with Iran being desperate and maybe using. Maybe they have a dirty bomb. I mean, who knows what could happen? But Iran attacking, for example, the Al Udeid U.S. airbase in Qatar, or attacking oil installations, or choking off the Straits of Hormuz, which would immediately cause a global oil crisis. They could not only cause massive loss of life all over the region, but a global like massive recession, maybe a depression on this account. Moreover, if the U.S. suddenly finds itself in a major shooting war, maybe a ground invasion of Iran, um, that's such a distraction from everything in the world that events could start to happen in Taiwan, with China taking advantage of this, between India and Pakistan, which just barely avoided a war a few weeks ago, and in Russia, Ukraine, where who knows what Putin could do if he feels the world's attention is focused elsewhere. He's already a little bit on, I think, emboldened by the fact Trump clearly supports him over Zelensky. So with Russia's dependence on Iranian drones, there's a scenario where the U.S. suddenly finds itself fighting Russia over the skies of Iran. I mean, you could have a version of a world war here, um, and so I would not be sanguine in the slightest about the possible consequences. But I think what the Israelis want is for the Americans to do what they can't do, which is bunker bust Fordo. And at that point, maybe they declare victory. I'm pretty sure that Trump at that point would pull the plug and say, "All right, Iran, we're going to resume negotiations, unless you want to really be hammered." And then like, but I don't think they would. Iran has already asked for so, and Trump has been boasting about this. So the sanguine position is that America has a limited intervention to take up Fordo, enabling everyone to say, "All right, we've destroyed their nuclear program, and stated ambition," and then at the table with Iran make an ultimatum. It's very clear that Trump has no patience for Obama era endless negotiations with other powers involved. The ultimatum would be you hand over all your enriched uranium, you never do it again, no more support for like crazy militias all over the region, undermining the sovereignty of Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen. They're trying to do it in Jordan, messing around with Hamas and Jihad, creating the massacre of October 7th. All that is over with, and also probably your missile program. By the way, if they were smart, I could see a deal. And Trump, loves deals. Trump has been saying that they can't enrich any uranium. That's a little bit bullshit because Iran is a signatory to the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, and under the NPT, they have the right to enrich, I believe, up to 3.67%. So what they can give them is what they've been withholding so far. So it's a negotiation.
What I was just beginning to bring up with the audience, I'm wondering if you can weigh in on, is this peace
The
and foreign
big, beautiful
affairs today.
deal.
Yeah. Well, I was extending even further to, I was wondering if Iran sees what essentially the author in Foreign Affairs was saying, which is that maybe Israel and the United States' position isn't that strong here because there's never been an instance where air power alone has been able to induce regime change. The historical precedent is that, if anything, the Iranian regime's position is being strengthened right now, that their population is under bombardment. And it's unlikely that they'll fall based purely on bombing alone. So that's one piece of it. That's one piece of it. The other piece of the argument, and you can comment on both or either, whatever you prefer. The other piece of the argument that I wanted to ask you about that maybe the U.S. position isn't that strong here is, in addition to, the economic fallout that we could have with Iran taking actions against world trade. I have a piece going up in Newsweek tomorrow, in which I argue that Donald Trump has made the United States more vulnerable to terrorism than at any time in the last 100 years, certainly. Because He's fundamentally divided us. He's fundamentally degraded our strategic reserve of trust and our ability to kind of black start the way we did after Pearl Harbor, after 9/11, to fearsome military juggernaut. We no longer have the trust to be able to get behind, to rally behind military action to protect ourselves in response to an attack. And so there are a number of asymmetric responses that Iran could engage with here that we are very vulnerable to, and they surely must see this attacks through proxies, sleeper cells, cyber attacks. So that's my overall question to you is what do you think the Iranian leadership's view on this is, their strategic view on this is? Do they see the US as being vulnerable here? Do they think that they can get away with, they can kind of withstand this? Um, because they have such powerful means to retaliate with.
Uh, if the means are terrorism, then yeah, sure, they do. I mean, it's so hard to repel terrorism that's determined to get at you, especially if the perpetrators are suicidal, which Islamic terrorists often are. So I frankly wonder why there isn't more Islamic terrorism. Um, America did this to itself by basically deciding that any idiot should have a gun. And explosives are also very easy to get in the U.S. And you have, I mean, the rest of the world is amazed at the stupidity of the American gun situation, and that's really why it's so easy.
Mm.
Um, but putting that aside, I don't know whether the Iranians really understand America that well. It's clear that Hamas understands Israel pretty well, but they're very close together. They're proximate. I think these Iranian mullahs are so detached that they just don't get very much. I Your thesis is interesting, but and sometimes it works. Like for example, the divisions in Israel that were created by Netanyahu's judicial coup, essentially the authoritarian overhaul. The security establishment said, "Look, we're looking so weak that this is going to invite attack." Clearly, that's what happened. We know it.
That's something I
Um,
cited
so
in the Newsweek piece. I cited that exact point.
um, the divisions in America are toxic. That's true, but I don't think that means that America is more vulnerable than it otherwise would be. I mean, what you had in Israel, just so viewers understand, is the entire elite, which includes the pilots and heads of the military and the heads of the Mossad and the senior people in every institution. They were horrified by the idea of turning Israel to Turkey or Russia light. And the Netanyahu's coalition depends on hyper-religious fanatics, and they were saying stuff like the hell of the pilots, like God will protect us. Now imagine how dumb you have to be, and are they feeling like a little bit simple today? Where would Israel be in this war with Iran if not for the very people they were inviting to leave the country because God will take care of it, and we want to be an authoritarian dictatorship? Wow, just wow. For all the divisions that Trump has sown in the U.S., it isn't quite at that level yet. So I think the U.S. would unite against, terrorists, another 9/11, God forbid. But who knows? I could be wrong.
Yes.
Uh, I agree with you that revolution can't be induced purely from the air, unless, of course, you bombard everything and kill like 20 million people. Then maybe, but no plausible scenario from the air is going to do a revolution in and of itself. However, the humiliation of the regime and the damage done to the regime by the coming hopefully capitulation and all the things we mentioned, and B, the diplomatic process, where I think Iran will face a binary choice. You either we're going to lift the sanctions and really be our ally again, and it'll be great for Iran, and that would be messaged like nobody's business to every Iranian person. Or whatever happens with the proxies and everything else, I think the sanctions stay. I think they stay, and Iran is now weakened and has been exposed as illegitimate, even in the eyes of people pretending to be progressive and confused on this issue. Because note that the Europeans are with Israel too, essentially. The G7 put out a statement that was largely pro-Israel. Germany, the German chancellor said yesterday, Israel's doing our dirty work for us because we basically were too cowardly. The Romanian foreign ministry put out a statement pretty much along those lines. And Romania is a major NATO frontline state with Ukraine. This is rather amazing isolation of
Mm.
Iran, whose friends now are China and Russia. Tell me who your friends are, and I'll tell you what your real situation in life is. We remember all these palace coups as revolutions romantically, but what happened in Romania in 1989 was a palace coup by the moderate wing of the Communist Party. There were people in the streets, but what brought down Ceausescu was a palace coup. Same thing happened in Egypt in 2011. We remember it as a revolution. It was the army that brought down Mubarak. The people propping up the regime in Iran, the Revolutionary Guard, the military, and some other forces, they're not religious fanatics that love the Ayatollah. They're corrupt mafia that's been bought for, and basically controls the economy, and they have interests. Made in Islamic Republic, if they kick out the mullahs, that's what will happen, in a very, very plausible scenario. So the cards have been laid on the table, the dominoes are sort of set up, and there's a real plausible series of events that could happen. It requires Trump to be clever, which I know
Boy,
is
you had me
absurd,
feeling
but
better until you
should
said that, Dan.
I know how I mean, this is the world we've made for ourselves. It's surreal. And
Yeah.
that's where we are. But who knows? He might get his Peace Prize yet.
But that is where I was hoping to lead things, because I was just trying to say, as you were getting back on, that I hope I'm wrong about the thesis that I lay out in my Newsweek piece. I am never in a position where I'm hoping that things will go badly for America. I'm always rooting for America in a very odd way. That means that even though I think he's a disaster and a dictator, and a thief and a felon, I know that last one. I hope for
I
Donald
mean,
Trump
those
to
are
be
fact.
successful. Right? Like I hope that he is successful in navigating the next few days. These are consequential decisions,
Well, I'll
but
give
I'm
you a reason
glad
why
that
you
we
should. Because he can't be reelected. Forget the third term nonsense. He can't be
right,
reelected. So the only reason, and you'd never even conceive of rooting against America, but what that would attach to if you were less of a patriot is you don't want him to get reelected. Well, he can't.
right.
So
I
let him
at this
have
point,
the president.
yes, at this point, his success is our success, is the world's success. We have to root for that. And I'm really heartened to hear you say that you think that this is realistic. You think that this is a viable, realistic scenario, that in a week we're going to be in a better place in all this. And I like to end on a hopeful note. Dan, thank you so much for making this happen. We were really, I mean, you were dodging incredibly trying circumstances. We were dodging the much more mundane challenges of technology, but we made it work. Thanks to everyone who's watching this live, or will catch it up on the YouTube channel on Cliff's Edge. Make sure, ask questions later is the Substack, where you can find Dan Perry, all of his analysis. So make sure to find him there. My Substack is worth knowing. Hopefully you're on there right now. So be safe, be well, best to your family, and to everyone out there. Thank you for joining us, and you be well also.